So we left off just at the beginning of chapter 21. And I want to just read again the last verses of chapter 20. Joab was commander of the whole army of Israel. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was commander of the Cherethites and the Platites. Adoram was in charge of forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Abilud, was recorder. Sheva was scribe, and Sadok and Aviatar were priests. Ira the Yaira also served David as priest. This is like a summation, not so much of the stories before. Yes, the stories before, but there's a summary of David coming back to Jerusalem, David now in charge. This is his staff. And it kind of is like a happy ending. It's an ending in the sense of David's in charge and everything is organized. All, the military is in place, the civil administration is in place, everybody is back to normal. And in many ways, this is the end of the book of Samuel. Because beginning with chapter 21, these are considered appendices to Samuel. Appendices, not in the sense that somebody else wrote them and stuck them on, in the sense that they are out of chronological order. Okay, from chapter 21, there are stories that did not necessarily happen after this point that we read at the end of chapter 20, but happened at different times. And some of them are stories and some of them are not. We have actually the chapter 20 is stories, one major story and a couple of little things. Chapter 22 is poetry. Okay. Chapter 23 is also poetry. And then followed by a list of wait one second. Right. At the end of chapter 21, we also have a list of people, the different staff of David. Okay. Then we have chapter 22 is poetry. Chapter 23 begins with poetry and then goes on to another list of all these people that were part of David's whatever. And then we end up with some story. So basically we have three types of things these last couple chapters. We have lists, we have stories, and we have poetry, two of each. Okay. And they're all, and some of them was very obvious that it's not necessarily at this time, at the end of his end of his rule. Some of it is not as obvious. So with that introduction, let's start with chapter 21. And the first verse, there was a famine during the reign of David, year after year for 3 years. Okay. So first of all, it says during the reign of David. It's very clear from the way this is worded, sometime during the reign. It's not, if it didn't say during the reign of David, then we would assume it came after this. But by putting in the words during the reign of David, we know it was sometime during that point, not necessarily here at the end. And this is a famine that's very significant. It goes on for 3 years, which is quite a long time. 3 years in a row, okay? And of course, in those years, famine meant starvation, okay? You had, most people would put away wheat and staples, that could be stored, and they would put it away for a hard time. But if you don't have rain, there's no irrigation, there's no desalination of seawater. Your wells start, in other words, even if you don't have rain, so your other sources of water, like in the lake, like in the Sea of Galilee, or in the aquifers, digging wells, all of that can take you up to a certain point, but at some point, those wells also dry when there's famine. So very, very serious time when you have a famine for 3 years. So David's response here is very normal. David inquired of the Lord, And the Lord replied. Okay, now one thing that I want to point out here, by the way, a lot of what I'm teaching today is on the basis of a very, very popular and brilliant Bible teacher in Israel. He's the head of the Bible department at Bar Ilan University. His name is Yonatan Grossman. I've never studied with him long term, but I've heard many lectures of his, both in person and on YouTube or whatever. And he's great. He's amazing. He's written books all in Hebrew. I think he might have something in English. I think some of the stuff recently was written in English. If you're interested, Jonathan Grossman. Anyway, so he gave, this is a chapter that as I said last week, very, very difficult chapter. It's going to take us, we're not going to do it all today. And I have to admit, I'll tell you now at the start, we're going to discuss it a lot. I'm going to bring a lot of ways of looking at it, but I have to say, even at the end of all of this, and I've done a lot of reading and a lot of talking, and I've spoken to Bible teachers about this, and there's one basic question I've never had an answer to. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so anyway, what this Bible teacher pointed out is very interesting. The word in Hebrew, vayevakesh David sought the face of God. That's actually, it doesn't say, my English says he inquired of the Lord, but actually the actual words that are used here is he sought the face of the Lord, and pointing out that when you use the term he inquired of the Lord, that is when you have a specific problem, a specific question, and you go to God and you say, this is what I need. Please give it to me. Or I don't understand something. Please tell me what to do. In this case, seeking the face of the Lord means looking at a much broader perspective. It's not just get rid of my famine. It is help me understand what this famine is all about. Okay. So it's a broader thing, which is very interesting because that gives us a certain perspective on what we're dealing with here. So we'll read the first, there's two parts of the story actually, and we're going to read the first 9 verses, which is the first part of the story, and we'll start with there. Okay, so what does God say? And the Lord replied, it is because of the blood guilt of Saul and his house, for he killed the Gibeonites. The king summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of Israeli stock, but a remnant of the Amorites to whom the Israelites had given an oath. And Saul had tried to wipe them out in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. David asked the Gibeonites, "What should I do for you? How shall I make expiation so that you may bless the Lord's own people?" The Gibeonites answered him, "We have no claim for silver or gold against Saul and his household, and we have no claim on the life of any other man in Israel." And David responded, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." Thereupon they said to the king, "The man who massacred us and planned to exterminate us so that we should not survive in all the territory of Israel, let 7 of his male issue be handed over to us, and we will impale them before the Lord in Gibeah of Saul. Well, it means actually at the mountain of Saul, the chosen of the Lord. And the king replied, "I will do so." Now, before we get to each verse and showing some things, the story itself is horrific. I mean, we'll continue. The king spared Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord between the two, between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. Instead, the king took Armoni and Mephibosheth, another Mephibosheth, okay, the 2 sons that Ritzpah, daughter of Aiah, bore to Saul, and the 5 sons that Merav, or Michal, that's whatever, daughter of Saul, bore to Adriel, son of Barzillai, the Mecholite, and he handed them over to the Gibeonites. They impaled them on the mountain before the Lord, All 7 of them perished at the same time. They were put to death in the first days of the harvest, the beginning of the barley harvest. So this is a horrible story. God brought a famine on Israel for 3 years. After 3 years of famine, David realizes that there's something divine about all of this. And so he seeks God. And God says to him, this is because of the blood guilt of Saul and what he did to the Gibeonites, that he killed the Gibeonites. Clearly, what God is saying to David is that because the Gibeonites are angry at Israel, because of this injustice or murder or whatever that was done to them by Saul, I brought a famine. God brought a famine because the Gibeonites are angry with Israel. So David understands from God that what he needs to do is find out why the Gibeonites are angry and what he can do to pacify them. And the assumption being, if he pacifies the Gibeonites, he pacifies God, and then God will bring the rain. So when he goes to the Gibeonites, they say, Saul destroyed, murdered lots of us, tried to exterminate us, and therefore what we want is for you to give us 7 of Saul's male descendants so that we can kill them. And David said, okay. And then he handed over 7 descendants of Saul. Now he spared the remaining descendants of Jonathan because he had this pledge to Jonathan. Okay. But he gave, Ritzpah was a concubine of Saul, and she had 2 children with Saul, so he gave those 2, and he gave 5 children of, well, this is very interesting. What does it say in your Bible in verse 8? 5 sons of who?
Michal.
Michal. Do you all have 5 sons of Michal?
Yeah.
Okay, that's exactly what it says. It says 5 sons of Michal, and I find it very strange that my English translation says Meirav. I know why the English translation says Meirav. It makes sense, but I'll tell you what the problem is, okay? And this is just kind of a side issue, but it's an interesting problem. Michal, we learned about Michal. Michal was David's wife, okay? The daughter of Saul, David's wife. And the scripture tells us specifically that she never had children to the end of her day. So how could she have 5 children? There's another problem. Michal was married to David. Saul then gave her to Palti and then brought her back to David. So even if you could say, well, maybe she had children from Palti, she was never married to Adriel. Who was married to Adriel? Her sister, Meirav. So that's why my translation in English says Meirav, which is really weird because it doesn't say Meirav, it says Michal. And there's a lot of questions. Why does it say Michal? And I think the most logical explanation is one of the classic Jewish explanations, a very ancient one, that says that Michal raised these children. And it was Meirav who had these children, who bore these children to her husband Adriel, but it seems maybe she died young or whatever, actually raised them, which is why she is presented here as if she's their mother. It's the better, I think, anything other ones I've seen, but okay, but that's the question.
Yeah,
But
my NIV has Meirav.
Has Meirav. Okay, so that's probably the same source as this one, but that's why. I mean, it has to be Meirav that actually bore them because Michal didn't have children, and Meirav was the one married to Adriel. So this is, well, why does it? But actually, Hebrew is Michal. Of that, there is absolutely no question. The Hebrew says Michal. Now, but the point is, these are 5 children of a daughter of Saul. So it's his grandchildren, okay? And And that's the 7 people that he gives to the Gibeonites, okay? I don't know. I find, before we go into the verses, isn't this troubling? Isn't it terribly troubling? Would God want David to give 7 innocent people to the Gibeonites to be killed because Saul, their grandfather or their father, did something wrong to the Gibeonites? It seems very problematic, to me at least. Just to skip to the end of the story, if you'll see at the end of the story, verse 14, and they buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in Selah in the territory of Benjamin. And okay, so that's a part of the story we haven't gotten to yet. And when all that the king had commanded was done, God responded to the plea of the land thereafter, which means God brought the rain. God brought the rain. In other words, after the end of this story, God brings the rain. So we have both the beginning of the story where God makes it very clear that David has to appease the Gibeonites, but appeasing the Gibeonites means handing over 7 innocent people to be killed. That's the story. Okay, so let's now just go a little bit into the verses themselves and try to get a little bit more of a clarity on what is actually going on here. So first of all, the first question is, in verse 1, when is it that Saul killed the Gibeonites? Believe me when I say there is absolutely no story in all of the book of Samuel or anywhere else that talks about Saul going and killing the Gibeonites. Now, one of the classic commentators of the Bible as a whole, Rashi, somebody that I've mentioned in the past from the 11th, 12th century, he said, and he didn't come up by himself, this is taken from the Talmud, and it says, he notes, first of all, that he asked for 7 people, and they make an assumption that the 7 people that they want to kill is because Saul killed 7 people. Now, it's a little bit hard to justify that he only killed 7 people because it says Saul tried to wipe them out. When you kill 7 people, that it's bad, you're killing 7 people, but it's not you trying to wipe them out. But putting that aside, we can go beyond the number 7 for a moment, but they then place this incident. When exactly did it happen? It happened when Saul, when he started chasing after David. It happened, if you remember, David's first place where he ran to get refuge was Nov. Okay, and this story is told in 1 Samuel chapter 22 and chapter 21. He comes to Nov. David, at that point, he doesn't realize how evil Saul is and to what lengths he's going to go. What we do know from this story is that Nov is a city of priests. When we studied this story, we talked about the fact that because it was a city of priests, it was clearly a place of worship. While the Ark of the Covenant was not here at this time, that we know, it was in Kiryat Yearim, but we can assume there was some kind of an altar, that there were priests there who were serving, the sacrifices, and it was a place that people would come and pray, seek the Lord, etc. We know that the priest, there was also the breastplate, the stones, the colored stone breastplate of the high priest, because we know from here, the surviving priest, Abiathar, takes it with him, and then he has it with David. When he goes after he leaves, Saul finds out that some of these priests helped David, and he massacres the entire city of priests. Now, that is a massacre that we know about, but as far as what tells us in chapter 21, it only tells us about the priests. Okay. Who are the Gibeonites? Okay, so if we look in in Joshua, the book of Joshua, chapter 9, I believe. Let me just find it. Yeah. Joshua chapter 9. And here we have an interesting story. Joshua's already begun the conquest of the land, and there's a group of people from Gibeon, and they come to Joshua and pretend that they are actually not from Gibeon. Gibeon is right there. Gibeon is adjacent to the territory of Benjamin. It's actually part of the territory of Benjamin. And if in modern day Israel, it's go out west of Jerusalem and you're in Gibeon territory. And they come to Joshua, they pretend that they are from a faraway land. And we know that there was a difference when the people of Israel come in to capture the land, they're supposed to wipe out or destroy or expel or whatever the people that live in the land, but that's not the same rule from somebody who comes from far away. We're not seeking battles with people who come from far away. And so they present themselves as people who come from far away. And they said, we see you're conquering the land, and we want to, get a promise from you that you're not going to come and get us. And so Joshua doesn't seek the Lord on this. He enters into a covenant with the Gibeonites, swearing to protect them, and he will never kill them. Afterwards, he finds out, these are Canaanites. They're living in the middle of the land of Israel. Okay, but they made a covenant, and he is loyal to that covenant. But what he says afterwards, he says, in verse 20, he says, we swore to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, therefore we cannot touch them. This is what we will do to them. We will spare their lives so that there be no wrath against us because of the oath that we swore to them. And the chieftains declared concerning them, they shall live, and they become hewers of wood and drawers of water for the whole community, as the chieftains had decreed concerning them. Okay, the understanding here, the traditional interpretation that these are, it's not just hewers of wood and drawers of water, but it's a symbol of all kinds of various manual jobs that they will serve. Okay, they need to serve. And the understanding was their main job was to serve the temple. Not, of course, as priests or anything like that, but they were the ones doing the manual labor. They were going to bring the water. They were going to cut the wood. They were going to do anything that needed to be done of that level. And that was, Joshua could not undo the oath, but he could say to them, but this is your job. Okay. So the logic behind connecting the Gibeonites with the murder of Nov is to say, their job was always around the temple, the tabernacle. And what was the main altar, the main place of worship during that time? It was Nov. And therefore, if Saul sent people to murder the priests of Nov, he also would have murdered the Gibeonites that were there. Okay, now there is you can see that as a general way. It makes sense. All the Gibeonites that were there, which is clearly not all the Gibeonites in the area, but let's say all the Gibeonites that was there. Now, there is a midrash that connects it with the 7 and says there were actually 7 individuals. There were two hewers of water, 2 cutters of wood, a scribe, a general overall servant, and I don't remember. Oh, here, and a singer, and a cantorial singer. Okay, I think what they connected certainly with this hewers of stone, of wood, and drawers of water, but at the same time, they're also finding the 7 to the 7. They're trying to say, well, why would they ask for 7? So that must have been because there were only 7 that were killed. As I said, I have a problem with the 7 versus the 7 because it doesn't seem to make sense. When our chapter talks about trying to wipe them out, 7 people is not wiping them out. Also, I'm not sure that the Gibeonites as a nation would have been so angry if 7 people were killed. I'm not saying they wouldn't be sad, but it wouldn't be the same. Okay, Now, there's also other indications that we have going back, if it's, let's say, clues to where there might have been problems between Saul, or at the very least Benjamites, okay, against the Gibeonites, okay? So, first of all, if we look in 2 Samuel chapter 2, chapter 4, 2 Samuel chapter 4. And what we have here is the final days of the civil war between David, between Judah, David, and the rest of Israel. Saul is dead, and Abner has appointed Ishbosheth, his son, as king, and then Abner tries to make peace. Abner is killed, and just after that, they're in the process of really, David is in the process of consolidating his kingdom to include all of the people of Israel and all those who had been loyal to Saul. And we have two people. This is 2 Samuel chapter 4. The son of Saul had two company commanders, one named Baanah and the other Rechav, sons of Rimmon the Beerotite, from a place called Beerot. Benjamites, since Beerot too was considered part of Benjamin. Now, this is a little weird. Beerot, do we know Beerot? It's considered part of Benjamin. What exactly is going on here? So let's go back to Joshua 9. Joshua 9, as we remember, is that story about the Gibeonites and Joshua. But there's one verse here that I want to show you. Verse 9, chapter 9, verse 17. Joshua 9, verse 17. This is right after they made this pact. So the Israelites set out, and on the third day, they came to their towns. These towns were Gibeon, Kfirah, Be'erot, and Kiryat Yearim. We learn here that, and by the way, Kiryat Yearim is very interesting. That's the town where they end up having the ark, which we can also connect with the fact that the Gibeonites were those who served in the tabernacle. At this time, we have a split between where's the altar and the worship and where's the ark. Both of those towns, okay, Nov, okay, we know Nov is a place where there were Gibeonites, but also here, Kiryat Yearim is considered one of the original towns of the Gibeonites, but so is Be'erot. And what it's telling us here is that these two people were from a town called Be'erot, but this is going back to chapter 4. The Gibeonites is, I'm in Joshua chapter 9. No, I was in these two people in chapter 4 of 2 Samuel. These two people that are about to kill, they will kill Ishbosheth. Okay, who are they? These are two people who kill the son of Saul, the remaining ruler of the house of Saul. Okay, and David is very upset when he hears about it. They think they're coming to David and they're going to get rewarded. Instead, David punishes them and kills them right away. Okay. But you have to ask yourself, why would these two people out of the blue come and kill Ishbosheth? When we first studied this, we thought that this was just two people who thought they were going to get in on the good side of David. Okay. But if we look at it closer and we just say the Be'erot is a Gibeonite place, also, their family name is Rimmon. Now, Rimmon is, it's where does it say they were Rimmon? Sons of Rimmon. Yeah, in verse 2, sons of Rimmon. Rimmon, it seems, is a name that is used as a Canaanite name and refers to a Canaanite pagan god. Okay? So it was highly unlikely that somebody of the house of Israel, somebody of the children of Israel, would be using a name Rimmon. So there is a theory here, which I think makes a lot of sense, that these are Gibeonites who come from Be'erot, and they are now Benjamites in the sense, it kind of doesn't say Beirut, Benjamites, since Beirut too was considered part of Benjamin. It kind of qualifies the fact, well, they're not really Benjamites in the sense that their ancestors, not Benjamin, but because they live in Beirut, which became part of Benjamin, they're considered Benjamites in the sense that, if you come from London, you're a Londoner, or whatever. Okay, so it's that kind of thing. So it's very possible that there's an ongoing feud here between the Gibeonites and Saul, and the Gibeonites here see an opportunity to kill a descendant of the house of Saul, the reigning king. So that's just another hint that could be. Now, another thing is okay, so we've done enough for today. I see we've run out of time. We're going to take this up. But basically, and just to point this out, and we're going to take this up in later detail, I don't know, we're not going to finish this next week either. It's going to be another couple things, because it's a very difficult thing, and we have to really dig, I think. So basically what we're saying here is, who are the Gibeonites? We say that there's been a problem between the Gibeonites and Saul, and we're trying to figure out where that's from. We've talked about the theory of Idnof. We've talked about other indications that there might be something bigger than this. Really, Saul really did try to, killed massive numbers of Gibeonites. And another thing that I would point out is there is a concept here that keeps coming back to play, and that's the idea of an oath, okay? You'll recall Joshua made an oath to protect the Gibeonites, okay? And here, we have that mentioned in verse 2, to whom the Israelites had given an oath. And we have this clearly then, when Saul killed Gibeonites, he was violating an oath that was made by a leader of Israel on behalf of Israel to the people of Gibeon. So we have a violation of an oath. We also have when David decides who to choose of the descendants of Saul to give to the Gibeonites, he does not take any of the descendants of Jonathan because of an oath that he swore to, actually he says to Jonathan and to Saul. And we'll see also, he swore to both of them. Okay, and we'll check that out afterwards. So I'm going to leave you with this idea. What's going on here at some level is violation of an oath and how serious that violation is. Okay, and that's part of an understanding of what's going on here. So that's all for today. But we're right in the middle. Any comments or questions?
Is the seriousness because there are priests involved as well?
That what's involved?
Priests.
Brit. A brit is a covenant, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a very serious. Oh, the priest.
Kohanim.
The priest, yes, possibly. And that's one of the things, I'll just point that out, that we, in Joshua 21, which we don't have to look at it now, but if you want to write it down and check, Joshua 21, verse 17, it talks about these cities of Gibeon become Levite cities. And that means that if at some point Saul eradicated the Gibeonites, or most of the Gibeonites, or a lot of the Gibeonites from these cities, who would have been then taking over those cities? The Levites and the priests. So it could very well be that exacerbates the problem. Okay, that this breaching of the oath is God's involved in this somehow. It reflects on God somehow. And that I'm just going to leave that with you with a thought as we go in to see what's going on here. Anyone else? Okay. Yes, Carol.
I think when we read it, we all feel it's a bit over the top. You're horrible in actual fact when these sons are taken. But I was thinking back, with Korah, Dathan and Abiram, they sinned, but the whole families, as far as I recall, were swallowed up. So that is
Wait, I missed the
was
name.
It Korah, Dathan and Abiram during Exodus?
Oh, Datan Abiram, yeah.
Sorry, I'm pronouncing them
Korach,
incorrectly, but I mean,
Actually, right, but they were, in that case, no. The people that were ended up killed were the people who were actively involved. They were all part of, there's this followers of Korach. And these are the puns. And actually, in our tradition, the sons of Korach, at the last minute, separated from their father, stepped away from the rebellion, and were saved. And
was it Dathan and Abiram's families then that went down?
No,
Because
it's not family. It doesn't say family. It's
Oh.
it's the people that followed them.
Right, okay.
It says the
I've got that
Adat.
wrong.
It's like the congregation. Their followers. Their
Okay.
followers were swallowed up. So no, there you definitely have a situation of those who are guilty are punished.
Right. I stand corrected.
Yeah, no, it's a real problem because we also have, very specific verses in the Bible and in the, different places that talk about sons will not be killed for the sin of the father.
Mm. So when did
this,
that was later, wasn't it? That came a bit later.
Right, but that's a question. Was it, I think, well, it's Ezekiel, I think, who says, will the father sin and the sons eat sour grapes, meaning will the sons suffer from, but I think there's also that basic idea that comes earlier as well. Although we have this idea of bringing punishment up to the fourth generation, and that's a problem. That's, we ask that question, how is that just? And there's a lot of people, let me see where this is from. In Deuteronomy 24, okay? Deuteronomy 24, verse 16. Parents shall not be put to death for children, nor children be put to death for parents. A person shall be put to death only for his own crime.
Yeah.
So, and that makes sense. That's justice. That's, what we would consider the right and ethical way of handling things. Anyway, well, it leaves a lot of question for us that we will continue next week and probably the week after as well.